Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for your time this morning in joining us to panelists, and thank you for everybody attending and watching. We're also recording this sessions, and then we're going to edit it, put it on YouTube for people, especially care workers and managers, to be able to access and watch as well. Because as you all know, it's not that easy for a care worker to be able to access these things, especially during the day. So as we do every year, we'll be sharing it with people far and wide after today. So we have another Professional Care Workers Week this year. This is the week to celebrate care workers, all of their hard work and commitments to supporting people. And every year we invite people like you that we've got on the call to share your experiences and opinions about social care. So let me just quickly introduce our panelists. I've got Ali Al-Mufti from Arcadia Care Homes. I've got Ruth French from Stove Healthcare. I've got Leah Smith from Barclay Care Group. I've got Camille Leovold from Abbott's Care, and Sophie Chester-Glynn, who's our trustee and also runs Manor Community. So good morning, good afternoon to you all, and thank you for joining. A webinar that we've got right now is called The How, and the how is about how we can really do things differently and address certain issues in social care. So I'll start you all off with quite an open question. As you all have extremely great experience in supporting care workers, in terms of how can we do things differently and challenge the usual practice in social care, especially when it comes to the workforce. And Ruth, could I ask you to start, please?
Thanks, Carolina. It's great to be part of this event at the start of what I know is going to be a busy week for you. And I guess the perspective that I would come at it from, and maybe it's helpful to share that with people, is that I own 8 residential and nursing homes in the east of England. I guess our unique selling point is that we acquire homes that have had a really difficult past, have often got a really poor rating with CQC, and then we turn those around, hopefully, to become outstanding rated homes. And I think that's relevant because very often we will be dealing with quite a demotivated workforce, probably a workforce that's 50% full of agency staff, a workforce where it's definitely been hard to recruit to that home. So we do have understanding of what it can be like when, you know, you're perhaps a registered manager coming into a service and you need to have some tools in your toolbox to really start supporting your staff perhaps in a little bit of a different way. So, you know, what I'm always very keen to do is to give people some tangible ideas that they can take forward that don't require an awful lot of money, because a lot of people who are part of these webinars, the budget isn't necessarily theirs. There won't necessarily be a massive budget, even if it is yours to spend. So what kind of things that you do that are relatively cheap and easy to help understand how your workforce is really feeling, and to change things if you need to. So some of the things that we have found really helpful are just making well-being part of everyday conversations. And I know that sounds a really simple thing to do, but people can't do that unless they're given some tools. So we have, for example, tried to make sure that across our homes, we have got a member of staff, and we try actually and make sure that in most cases this isn't the registered manager, but we've got someone who is a mental health first aid trained. And I think that can be really helpful, because very often it's about people understanding what questions they can ask to support those around them, and recognizing some of the signs if you've got a workforce you know, that is suffering. And I think in this sort of post-pandemic era, I'm sure all of us are experiencing supporting staff who have got mental health problems like never before, and a lot of physical health problems as well, often connected with what they have gone through in the last few years. So I guess the important thing to see is what training is accessible. for people within your team who are really enthusiastic to try and support the well-being of those around them, but also making it part of the conversation. So one of the things that we've done, I don't know, you can't see that, I'll have to flip my background. If I just quickly change that, because I think it is helpful. We've put together this little leaflet, Raise Your Hand. It's a pocket-sized guide that was given to all of our staff. And then in it, you know, we've got little pointers, questions, we've got apps that people might find useful. And we did update this again last winter as well. So that was actually pretty quick and easy to put together. You don't have to have something that is glossy. Just have some ideas written down, have some prompt questions written down, maybe use staff meetings to discuss that. But we have also, as part of our quarterly one-to-ones, put together a sort of prompt sheet that line managers can use with those staff. So I guess that's my sort of my starter for 10 is how you can make this part of the everyday conversation with your teams. Thanks.
Lovely, Ruth. Thank you. And Camille, how about you and your team?
So we're home care, slightly different, coming at from a slightly different angle from Ruth, but actually agreed with what she said about it doesn't have to be really expensive. I think at Abbott's Care, we started the business, me and my sister, 28 years ago. So we were the care workers originally, and it's grown somewhat since then. But I think the key thing is always to recruit good people and look after them, and then don't let them leave. So that was back in those days. I think that was well-being. Well-being is very much more a more modern day term. But we do a number of things. I think the first thing that we do, that we did develop, which is a bit more expensive than what Ruth was saying, we developed a well-being app for our service users, but for our care workers during COVID, because obviously at that point the levels of anxiety and some mental health problems were so high because everyone was so worried, and we just needed a way of connecting with them really quickly and really easily. And it was really the first part of the wellbeing app was just a really front page. You know, you get the smiley faces, the smiley face, the sad face, and the neutral face at an airport where you've been through. And that was the idea. They could just whip it out of their pocket, and if they pressed the red face because they were really struggling, someone's here at the back end and we can give them a call. You all right? What's the matter? And that was the first part of sort of our wellbeing app, and that's evolved, and now it's very much more than that. It's a bit of a community thing where they can sort of talk to each other, support each other, as well as us supporting them. And also we can give sort of praise, and they can praise each other. So it's actually really evolved since then. But ultimately, that was a really quick aim, and it wasn't hugely expensive, probably a bit more expensive than the leaflets, but actually it's evolved into a place where people communicate, they share good practice. So it's kind of evolved from there. So that's one of the things that we really enjoy using. And obviously our workforce is remote, so we're not seeing them every day, so it's very difficult to sort of keep touch them. But I think for us the most straightforward thing is getting the feedback from the care workers themselves. So the first thing that we always do, we do regular questionnaires, and we ask them what it is they need. So we do that every 3 months. They don't all fill it in every 3 months. Sometimes they get a bit fed up and they're just like, oh my God, we're fine, stop asking us. But I think things like that to support their wellbeing, no, they have a method of communicating with us. And actually, you know, as Ruth was saying, one of the things that always scores more highly than salary, and obviously we must pay care workers well and as much as we possibly can with the rates that we are commissioned to do. But one of the things that they rate higher than pay is making a difference to people's lives. So actually just facilitating that is really not that difficult, is it? You know, so just being able to offer really good runs of work with plenty of travel time, answering their concerns when they're saying this service user's not okay, not just like, you know what, she'll be fine, you know, making sure you're answering their concerns, and just facilitating good rounds of work like that with clients that they really want to go and see actually does enable them to make a difference to people's lives. So that's a really quick and easy. That's what I would say when we're talking to maybe some smaller providers. That doesn't take much money to do that. Do you know what I mean? That's really, really quick and easy to do.
Thanks a lot. And Ali?
So we're a 28-bed home. So I always look at this from the little guy's perspective, and the little guys all makes up the bulk of care homes in the country. The two elements that I've always looked at is pay, and to me, pay is on its own pedestal, and it's the most important thing, because money solves a lot of problems, and a lot of people's problems are outside of the workplace. They're at home, and when someone can't pay their bills at home, that comes into work, and that's going to affect them negatively. So pay was the most important thing to me, and it will always be the most important thing. That's the first domino. And secondly, it's how I can just make life easier. I don't buy into the notion that work has to be hard and it has to be difficult and it has to be stressful. I don't think it needs to be all those things to feel like you've done a good day's work at the end. I think my job is to make life as easy as possible for the workforce. And the simple, easy thing that made the biggest difference, and it takes a while. There's no quick fix. I think there's no silver bullet, and I think people need to first grasp that commitment takes 12 to 18 months of consistency to get the recruitment rates and retention rates you want. We simply put out a 12-month rota was job one, and it was the easiest thing in the world, the most common sense thing in the world, and it made a huge difference to people. Obviously, they can plan their lives better. It reduced agency use. People were able to swap their shifts months in advance, plan their annual leave around their days off, etc., etc. And that was something that I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what is common and what's not among other homes. I only know what we do. But I do know that sometimes a rolling 2-week, rolling 4-week rota is the most common thing. Some homes still do weekly rotas, crazily. But if you do have something like a fixed rota, a fixed rolling fortnight, just copy and paste the thing for a year. Just do it and put it out. And that was the easiest, cheapest, quickest thing we did. The second thing is probably more suited to a small provider than a larger provider, and that was we scrapped our disciplinary policy. For us, that's really easy to do. For a large corporate, I imagine it's a bit difficult, and HR would be pulling their hair out. But that was the one where we told everyone the threshold for a disciplinary proceeding will be an allegation of gross misconduct. Anything below, we're going to practice what we preach about learning opportunities and areas of improvement and all this stuff that we say, but we can't really do because people are living in that fear of disciplinary action. And that was the one where on day one, you kind of just felt this collective sigh, just this breath everybody let out, because they had job security overnight. They had instant job security. That was the first part of it. The second part of it was we then saw over the next few months things that we may have in the past said would qualify as disciplinary action reduced. And then the third thing we saw, which I didn't actually expect to ever happen, but it did about a year later, was people coming to us saying, I've screwed up, I've done this, that, and the other, this is what happened. And that was like the dream. That was the utopian dream that I never thought would happen, but it did. And that was the moment where I realized that this actually works. This really does work. It's not just a gimmick. It's not just something to make them feel more comfortable. It actually improves performance and opens up a much more transparent line of communication. So for smaller providers, I would say it does work. And I would only say that now because we've done it long enough that we've seen the results, and people feel better at work. They feel more relaxed. And then when they trust it, because it can take a while to trust what your boss is saying, they will start coming to you with errors and mistakes, and they do learn from them. They actually do take them on as, and you as well have the chance to work with them to improve certain areas that they're making mistakes where that wouldn't have happened before, because people will shut up shop if they feel that they're at risk. Those two things cost nothing. They cost absolutely nothing. They just need some patience to let it bloom and let it develop. But I'm always the advocate for pay. We increased our pay this year in April from the real living wage to £13 an hour at minimum. It goes up to £16.50 depending on the job level, and also there's overtime rates, which is what has got our agency down to 0. We budgeted it, we worked it out, we made sure we could do it without much risk. We increased our fees 38%. We're fighting the council still on that. I'm one of those people that will do it because it's a good idea and I'll worry about everything after. Our self-funders were more than happy with that. We explained openly and honestly, this is the investment we're making in our people as well as other things in the home, but this is the main investment in our people. This is what we think is going to happen. We think we're going to fully recruit. We think we're going to retain everyone. We think we're going to get rid of agency. All those 3 things happened. And private payers were more than happy with that. They've been great. Councils, I could go into it, and I could go into what I think about it. But they're obviously going to be a much more difficult, no matter how honest and open and transparent you are with them, they're a much more difficult group to get on board. But finances aside and the risk of that aside, if you ask me, does it work? Does paying more solve a huge problem? Yes, it does. Most recently, we put a job ad out for a night position, notoriously difficult, and we had 351 applications. And I had nothing to do with the job description. I had nothing to do with how well I could write copy and make the job sound appealing. It's because it said £14 an hour. That's what got the click, and that's what got the CVs. Out of that, we were able to shortlist only 14, but we were able to be that selective. And I would have been happy with 14 CVs in the first place, let alone to be able to pick 14. And we obviously recruited 1 person. So I will always put money above everything because it solves a huge amount of problems, not because it's, what everyone wants and it's the most important thing and people are materialistic, nothing like that. It just solves problems at home that help people to feel more relaxed in work, and any other stuff, can work, whether it's more training, more mental health development, more incentives, whatever it might be. I think you solve that pay problem first, and the rest will become exponentially easier.
Thank you, Ali. And Sophie.
Hi, thanks for having me on here. So our services, I wear 2 hats. One is Money Community, and that's an organisation that supports people with learning disabilities, mental disabilities and older people. And we've got residential and supported living services. The other one is co-produced care, which is the logo behind me. So I'm in the wrong office, really. But I'm going to talk about our care organisation. So Money Community has been running for quite a few years and has been started off quite a small company, literally a shared lives project, and we've grown from there. And it's interesting because when we were smaller, it was much easier to have a family atmosphere, to keep turnover low. I think we were around 5% or something really, really low. And then as we started to grow and do different things and offer different services, that has become a lot of a challenge, but we still want to remain feeling very homely and giving the staff support that we want to give them. So we've been on this journey with trying to look at well-being, trying to look at attrition rates, and we've managed to keep turnover hovering around 10%. We'd like to keep it lower, but it's the best we could do at the moment. Obviously, there's lots of opportunities even in the NHS when you develop people, so it can be hard to keep people, but we've definitely looked back at our values and run sort of values-based recruitment through everything we do. So yes, we put it on our ads, we put it on our questions, for interview questions. They're all based on our values, but we also put it in our supervision. So and we make ourselves accountable. It's one of our values, is accountability, and we put it in our own, we don't call them KPIs, we call them quality of service monitors, to say, how are we supporting our staff team? Are they happy and are they feeling involved? And that's sort of kept us grounded in terms of not just providing care, because we obviously love what we want to do, but we want to look after the people that we work with. So that kind of led us to think about how can we open up our offer to staff. And obviously the finances issue is huge, but we've actually been looking at grants that we can get locally. So one of the ones that we got was our local provider association was putting out a grant to care organisations that wanted to support the well-being of their staff. And it started off with having a questionnaire to our staff, how is your well-being? Would you like to be a well-being champion? What would you want to change in your work to help your well-being? And it was really interesting, because you started off thinking, well, I've got some really good ideas for people, but when you ask the question back, you don't get what you would expect. So a lot of people were saying, actually, we really just want our staff room jazzed up. And that was, one team just wanted that. Another team wanted a staff, a fully, regularly filled staff fridge. So yeah, that's fine. Another a group of staff wanted, which we have done before in the past anyway, like a small hamper delivered to them, which had like toiletries and fun chocolates and drinks. So we managed to get that grant, and we delivered that to people, who wanted the hamper, people who wanted the fridge. We're doing that at the moment. And then we're getting someone else to help us revamp the staff room. So actually, what's quite interesting with going out to your staff members is they actually tell you a lot of the things that you would not realize that you need to do yourself. So it's about that relationship you have with staff to let them lead what they need. And then the other things that we've tried to do are looking at our maternity pay and how we can offer enhanced maternity pay. And again, speaking to staff around, we've had quite a few people go on maternity leave, and when they do come back, we want to find out from them what would support them. I remember hearing from one member of staff, and she wanted to do nights because she's just come off maternity, but she was still breastfeeding, and she was really wanting to be a bit more comfortable while she was doing a night shift, and she was breastfeeding. Obviously, if anyone's had kids and is breastfeeding, obviously it can be quite uncomfortable. So then we wanted to talk to people coming back to work in that similar situation. How can we support you? Can we have a fridge that you can use just for your breast milk? Can we support you with breast pumps? Can we provide a space that's more suitable for you to do that? So I think really what we've been trying to do is connect with staff and find out what it is that they really want. And really the last thing to talk about on this subject is offering the EAP service, which I know does cost money, but it's definitely worth it. So the one that we've signed up for allows staff to just ring a consultant totally separate from us, not have to speak to us about any of their wellbeing issues. And they can help them with financial support. They can help them with any anxieties that they might be going through, which at the time, around the time of the pandemic, but also after the pandemic, when I know we're still kind of very much in, COVID times, but anxiety generally, I think, has increased in different areas. And it took a bit of time to get people to encourage them to really use the services. But the people who did use those services really, really rated them because it was independent. It was somebody they could talk to and get advice from. And anyone who was really struggling, we would offer an extra few sessions if they really needed it. And it was totally independent from us. They didn't need to worry about confidentiality or anything like that. So I think really just listening to your staff and what their needs are and taking their lead in terms of what would support them and their well-being has helped, not just with sort of team cohesion, but also with keeping staff on and keeping that family feel, even though we've got more staff on our team at the moment. And also I know that the Care Workers charity also supports a lot of care workers around their well-being. So we've actually raised money for that. And again, going back to our care workers and saying, how would you like to raise money? They had some great ideas, whether it's cake sales or whether it's running in like a 10K, and then just letting people have a bit more autonomy around their own well-being and how the company can support them.
Thank you, Sophie. That's brilliant. Thank you. Leah?
Hi, everybody. So at Berkeley Care, we have 12 care and nursing homes. And we have just over 1,000 staff now. I think it's really interesting to listen to everybody, and I've picked up a few points already. For me, it's about how do we move away from a one-size-fits-all approach, particularly for us as we're growing. That can become harder, but that personalised support for our team members is actually really important. So there's kind of two things that I'm thinking about in terms of, how do we do that? One is around person-centred leadership. Person-centred care, it's part of our DNA, it's what we do, but actually we should apply those same principles to our team members as well. Really personalising those conversations that we have with individuals to meet their needs and their wants, I think is really, really key. And one of the ways that we can do that, and something we've been focusing on a huge amount at Berkeley, is around moving from the idea of employee engagement to employee experience. So, really asking ourselves in everything we do, actually, how do we want our people to feel? How do they want to feel? How are we going to meet those needs? So, typically engagement is around maybe communication. We might do initiatives. We might have some projects around engagement, but they tend to be top down. And employee experience is much more holistic. So really understanding what each individual's needs, wants, aspirations, pain points they're going through, and then you design the experience around that information that you have. So some of the things that we've been doing, for example, is certainly within our people team, is we've looked at all of our processes, everything from advertising to recruitment to onboarding to our staff team member one-to-ones, and looked at the process, but at each point asked, actually, how do people want to feel? And we've tweaked things as a result of that. And I think, that's a really, really important thing that our team members really value, and means that they're getting that sense of satisfaction, and they're getting that sense of motivation. So from that kind of exercise, which is ongoing, it's embedded into everything really that we do. We've had some really interesting feedback. So, for example, we know that a lot of our team members struggle with sleeping. It's never something that we'd really considered before, but absolutely, when you think about it, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So really thinking about, okay, how as an organisation can we impact upon that? And that might be things like disconnecting. So really, really making sure that we support our team members to have a positive work-life engagement, which is right for them, because let's not forget, my work-life balance and your work-life balance may be very, very different, and we may need different things from it. So thinking about how can we do that, but also actually going out to our teams and saying, what do you do to help yourself sleep? How can we share some of what you do that might impact upon someone else as well? So, sleep, how can we help our team members, ourselves sleep better, is a focus that we've been having. We've included it in our staff newsletter, for example. One of the other really interesting pieces of work that we've been doing is around neurodiversity. So again, from this idea of employee experience and inclusion, we did a piece of work at the end of last year where we partnered with an external organisation, and we actually found that 30% of our team members are either neurodiverse or identify as being neurodiverse. That's a third of our workforce. And people who are who have neurodiversity, and that covers many, many different things, experience things very differently. But where we have a third of our workforce, we need to make sure that all of our processes and how we think about the experience is also viewed through different lenses as well. So there's been a huge amount of work that we've been doing around that. And then finally, I guess, from an experience point of view, cost of living, what we've been going through very, very recently, I think has touched so many people. And, the idea of pay is absolutely important, but sometimes even pay can't negate something that might happen that means that you have to consider either getting, a payday loan or using your credit card, for example. So one of the things that we've done at Barclay, we did last year, and we will certainly be doing again in the future, is we offer a hardship fund partnered with the Care Workers charity. And that's been really, really well utilised, and certainly from a well-being perspective, that financial well-being has been so impactful upon our team members who have needed it. So yeah, just to go back to the beginning, really think about how can we lead from a more person-centered way, personalise wherever we can, but also really think about everything that we're doing and actually what's the experience within that, I think is certainly my key takeaway.
Thank you very much, Leah, and thank you for mentioning partnering with us on the hardship funds for care workers, and that's something we offer across the sector. So if anybody would be interested in that, please get in touch. Now, it's been many years that I've been talking and challenging the CQC around the workforce. For a long time, I've been told workforce is outside of the CQC's remit, so there isn't really much they can be doing. So I'm not sure if I'm an outsider here, but I'm actually quite excited about the new CQC framework that's coming in, because there are many more places that it speaks about workforce well-being, and particularly around the workforce well-being and enablement. And then obviously that's being able to support care workers to deliver person-centered care. Sophie, I saw recently you put out a post that you've done some research and work into it. You've got a whole spreadsheet for people to be able to download. So could I start with you with a question of what can care providers do around evidencing workforce well-being and enablement? What could be good tips that focus on the workforce, not necessarily ticking the CQC box?
Yeah, so I'll just talk about that form actually. And yes, it's not about ticking a box, but also you do have to kind of fill in boxes in order to evidence what you're doing. So I remember just looking at the new, and I know it's in development at the moment, and I was thinking, I'm having my managers meetings, but how do I evidence what we're doing at the moment if we were to have an inspection? So I just put all of the information from the website around the new inspection framework into a Excel spreadsheet. And I'm not a whiz at numbers, but I do like things visually laid out quite simply. So that's what I did. And I have, if people join Co-Produced Care's mailing list, it's on our website. I'm just going to send that out and so people can use that. But yeah, it is amazing to see that workforce is down on there. And I'm really looking forward to filling in that part of the spreadsheet that just details everything that we're doing around workforce. And actually, I think it's really useful because as care organisations, I think we do a damn fine job in a lot of areas, and we just don't give ourselves credit for it, because the stuff that's out of our control a lot of time with conditions and pay and things like that, and how much local authorities pay us, is sometimes that takes over the conversation around what we do and what we can do for our workforce. So I think just sitting down and really going through everything that you do is really important. And the kind of things that I do want to put in it are the things around obviously our EAPs are the schemes that we have, but not just about the schemes, but how they're changing people's lives. So whether it's about changing people's anxieties, helping their families. So at one point we'd signed up to a online GP service where all of our staff could access a GP online for free, especially if it's difficult to get an appointment with your own GP. And they could also use that service for their family. And some people had used it for their sons or daughters or somebody who couldn't get an appointment really quickly. But also it's the kind of things that you're doing around your staff team, whether it's so we do a person of the month basically for each service, and they'll get a certificate and nominated and for awards around the amazing things that they do. give a budget to managers so that they'll be able to do, whether it's a staff meal, or sometimes we do Domino's deliveries, or we'll do donuts. Not all very unhealthy, I know, but it's those things actually that we get most feedback from people saying thank you so much, or like free fish and chips, free lunch, let's just all just chip in and do something. And they think, you know, they might be having a really long day or really hard day, and suddenly they get this perk, and it may seem really basic. But I think when you are having one of those days and you get that recognition, and it's a surprise, that all accounts to well-being. It's not just the larger things that you're doing, whether it's an enhanced, you know, maternity, paternity, sickness pay where you're able to do it. But also working with other organisations that might be able to support you. So whether it's with your local authority to see what grants have you got that can help me and my workforce. Recently, I've been encouraging our local authority to work with the Care Workers Charity, because there is an opportunity for the local authorities to have a grant where they can actually support care workers in the area. So that's something that people can look into with their own local authorities. And definitely, I mean, CQC is looking for the ways that you're collaborating as well. So don't feel like you, as a one-man band, if you're a small organization or within an organization, have to think of all of the things yourself. There are actually quite a lot of pots of money out there that local authorities either should be helping you with, or they could be helping you with. And I think it's just to send that email out and say, this is what we want to do. How can you support us? Definitely don't feel that you have to do everything by yourself. And also the smaller things around you know, supporting them with any support they need at home, with if they are struggling, if you really want to find out what issues, maybe using the supervisions, how you're using supervisions to look at well-being, all of those smaller things that you think, well, I'm just doing that because I do it. You're still looking at people's well-being, and you're still thinking holistically about the person that's coming to work, not just seeing them as a number on the sheet of staff that are working that day, but you're also seeing them as a whole person. One of the things that we're hoping to do this year is to have every person and their dog day, where we encourage staff to bring their families, their pets, young people, and also socialize with some of the older people that work with them. So it's quite nice to have that intergenerational connection, but also you're seeing people outside of work, and I think that bond is really, really important. But if you're doing all these things, please do ask for feedback, because the evidence, even for your own self, to just see that feedback that you've done an amazing job, it just means a lot. And what we've done, we've used SurveyMonkey quite a lot, so you can get a QR code. So when we've had sort of like wellbeing days or anything in the office, we put the QR code and we said to people, can you please just, you know, scan your phones over this and then just fill out this short questionnaire, and then you've got that evidence. So if anybody, yes, you're doing the thing, but what's the so what factor of that? So just make sure you evidence it. So yeah, that's a few words from me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sophie. And Camille, how are you going to address CQC requirements around the workforce in home care?
So obviously with home care, as I said, we have a remote workforce. So I think one of our key values of the business is supporting our staff and developing our staff. And because of that, we're kind of at Abbott's, what we do is we have the service users in the middle. The next circle round is the care work team, and then we circle ourselves around there. So that's kind of how we visualize it, to ensure that, you know, all of the back office, if you like, is supporting the care workers, and the care workers supporting the service users. And I think there's a number of things for a remote workforce that work a little bit differently to supported living and residential care. So one of the things is that you're not seeing the care workers all the time. So what we do, because we are spread out over a fairly big geographical area of our branches, we have our hubs. So and at our hubs, what we do is we go in and we have care worker, customer service workers. And their sole job when we brought them in is to keep the care workers happy. So they really work under the people and culture team, the HR team, the old-fashioned name, but the people and culture team. And their job is just to support the care workers. So they go in and have regular hubs every week. They go to like a community centre. It's a regular place. And they obviously give out PPE, which is the more straightforward stuff. But there'll be a number of people there from different departments. And it might be somebody from the people team to talk about HR. We have a similar service to Sophie where they can phone up. It's actually not that well used. Do you know? I mean, we were quite surprised. We have like about 500 care workers. And I think last month, 10 people used it. So I was quite surprised by that. But it's just one of the tools that we use. We've got a number of tools to support. And I'm hoping that people are going elsewhere with that or they're coming straight to us. But that's kind of a key part of our strategy is that open level of communication. I think the other thing from that, we collect data. So I think the other thing with CQC is like it is we do this, we do that. What impact does it have? And what we do with all of the different tools we use to support our staff, we collect the data. So the data is always available. So that's collected and it's part of our targets really to make sure we've touched everybody and everybody has had some sort of support. So we use that data when CQC come to be able to evidence it, because as much as they're interested in, very much interested in what the service users and the care workers are saying, you still need to be able to back that up with what impact that's had. So what we do when we get that feedback from the app, from the hubs, from the care worker customer service team, is that's all fed in and we'll produce like a quarterly report about how we're doing. And then we feed that back in to the care workers as well. So they're aware of what we're doing to support them. And we ask for consultation with that and we ask them to sort of put their ideas forward. But from a CQC perspective, that's quite important. And I think the other things that we do, obviously we use the app to feed into that as well. But I think the other things that we do to kind of evidence back to CQC, we do things like the Care Worker Awards, where service users, we don't do the awards. We have an annual awards. We don't actually nominate anyone. All the care workers nominate each other, or the service users nominate them. And it started off probably about 5 or 6 years ago, quite small, but actually we've just literally run it again. We've had 220 entrants for the Care Worker Awards, which we're just like absolutely blown away with. But again, on those forms, it's the service users actually telling us how good the care workers are and putting them forward. So again, that's more evidence. And I know it's great that we do all these lovely things and we know we're supporting them, but actually from a CQC perspective, there's no point saying if you haven't got the data to back it up. So we use all of that to evidence back to them. And we're outstanding in our head office branch. So that seems to have worked. So that went twice, actually, the last 2 CQCs we've had. So that seems to have worked quite well. They quite like seeing the data as well as the feedback from the care workers.
Thank you very much, Camille. And Ruth?
Well, I'll just say something that might be a little bit controversial, although I suspect spending time on the social media platforms where lots of care home and social care managers in general spend time, I don't think it will be. What I do feel very strongly is we can't let our support for staff well-being overtake how important it is to be having regular attendance, expectations around our staff attending work. And I think it is really important for all of us to be making sure that we have got really good systems and processes when our staff aren't turning up for work, because ultimately, if we don't have sufficient numbers of suitably trained staff to support those people we care for, we can't do our jobs properly. And I've got a really good example of this from recently when I was in a home and staff were expressing to me that they didn't feel that staff absence was being treated seriously enough in the home. And it was having a really significant impact on their well-being, never mind the well-being of those they were trying to care for, because, agency staff were having to be used and those people didn't know the residents and, it was getting silly and people were texting in 10 minutes before their shift. And I think it is really important for all of us to understand what is acceptable, because the expectation should be People turn up for shift 100% of the time. And where they don't, it is dependent upon us as the people who are overseeing services to understand why that is not happening. And yes, what support can be put in place for those people who, you know, have got genuine issues, but also use that as an opportunity to think, is this person right for this environment? And I think we do have to be honest with ourselves around that as well, because there will be some staff, and it doesn't matter how much support we give them, they're not going to be right in our environment because they haven't got that level of dependability that's going to be needed. So I know that might be a little bit controversial to say, but it is really important that we don't let that we are giving equal measure, yes, to staff well-being, but also we must be thinking about the well-being of those people we care for and making sure that the service they are being given is what they should be being given. So what I would say is it's really important, A, that we've got decent processes around this that are fair and applied equally to everyone, and that we are following everything up with, you know, return to work discussions, that we've got a system, you know, whatever system it might be that you use. But we do understand, you know, there are certain limits where it isn't going to be acceptable, and for their colleagues to understand that some of these things are being followed up as well. Because it isn't right that we brush things under the carpet. Number one, there might be staff with a genuine issue there that is not being explored. And if you haven't taken the time to sit down and have that conversation with them, you know, you're not going to be able to support them appropriately. And number two, you know, if you're just not dealing with that properly, you're exacerbating it, and that's having a massive impact on the morale of the rest of your team. So, you know, I think it is just worth reflecting that as well.
Thank you, Ruth. And I don't think it's controversial at all. I think it's a very valid point that there are many things that impact well-being of your team, and part of it is other team members. And like you say, clear consequences and clear lines of what is acceptable, what isn't. It's a very important part of it. Leah?
Yeah, hi. So, I mean, we do many of the things that have been spoken about already. You know, we give out information signposting to Mind, to the Care Workers Charity, for example. We have a EAP, a digital GP service, employee cash plans. There's a lot of these things that we do, and they are important and they can work well. But I think for me, it comes back to this question that we should be asking ourselves around what creates well-being. And actually, the answer is different things for different people. So I'm kind of going back to my original answer around kind of personalising where we can, which can be really, really difficult. But for me, there's kind of 6 areas that typically, to different degrees, make up well-being for different people. And I think as care providers, no matter what our size, I think we need to look to kind of these 6 areas and ensure that our kind of strategies are shaped around it. So I think, you know, that the idea of trust is huge in well-being. Lead with trust, start from a place of trust, but also really try to develop that psychological safety of our team members, which goes back to things like, as Ruth shared at the beginning, encouraging people to speak up, being open and fair and transparent in our decisions, celebrating failures as well. That's a hard one to do, but that's a brilliant example of how you can really develop psychological trust within your team. And none of those things cost anything. I think flexibility is part of well-being, and it's something that we talk about an awful lot. And it's great to hear different ways that you know, we're offering flexibility. And yes, that's around things like shift patterns and working hours, but it's also wider than that. It's also around skills, for example, and, you know, how do we get involved in the things that we love to do and we're passionate about, and how can we do more of them? And enabling our team members to have that conversation with us. There's a piece around care. So I think, you know, feeling cared for, feeling valued, feeling appreciated, as well as the caring for others. So to Ruth's point, caring for other team members and understanding the impact of actions we have. And some of the things we do at Berkeley, and again, they're small little things, we'll have stay conversations instead of exit conversations. So we don't wait for somebody to leave. We have conversations with people about, why are you staying with us? What is it about Berkeley that you really enjoy? Actually, what don't you enjoy? And is there some things that we can put in place? And that all feeds into that sense of well-being. I think the idea around belonging is really important. So, developing a sense of team spirit and cohesion is really important. And yes, you can do team building activities, but sometimes encouraging things like peer-to-peer recognition can be really simple ways of creating that sense of belonging. I can't remember, it might have been Ali who talked about making things easy. I think that's part of well-being, actually getting rid of the hassle, making sure that we don't have bureaucracy or processes in place that actually are barriers. So really thinking through, are there things that we can do to challenge perhaps things that aren't working? And then finally, this idea of doing what matters, I think is important for well-being. So, making sure that we are doing what we say we're going to be doing, encouraging and talking about how meaningful work is for people, and then creating those moments of meaning. So I'm a big fan of listening more and talking less, and that is an example of how you can really understand what matters to people. And just a really short, quick thing that we've done that only recently, but it's already working really well, is when we send out our onboarding packs to new team members, we have a little short form which is called All About Me. So really similar, like we do with our residents, really, asking actually what's important to that particular team member. What do they enjoy? What don't they enjoy? What's their favourite snack? What motivates them and gives them energy? What demotivates them? It just gives us a little bit more insight into that particular team member, so we can adapt how we do what we do, so it meets their particular that particular person. So yeah, all of these things I think are really important aspects of well-being, and it's very easy sometimes I think to go to the services and the information, and that's important, but also step back and think about what makes up well-being, and the measure it's really, really important. So however that is, add another question on your survey. If you do pulse surveys, maybe do a specific one on it. Whatever it is, look at compliments and comments. I think that's really, really good evidence of all of the work that you're doing on wellbeing and how it's impacting your team members.
Brilliant, thank you. And last but not least, Ali?
So we've got a hybrid approach to everything that has the added benefit of being evidence in itself for an inspection for us CIW. I religiously track every metric to do with retention, recruitment, even occupancy, sickness records, everything. I've got this almost daily chunk of spreadsheets that I fill in, and it's all nicely formulated and it gives me the numbers and it spits it out. And combine that with constant feedback through anonymous forms a lot of the time, and mix that with simple feel. I mean, this is one of the luxuries I have of a small home, and being in it is you just feel it. You can sense when something's amiss or something's in the air or things are good or things might not be so good. And it gives you an ability then to hopefully spot something before it brews, and you stay ahead of the curve. My biggest fear is complacency, and I think that's something that naturally sets in as human beings as time goes on if you don't keep evolving. So it's trying to spot that warning sign. It might be something as simple as sickness records tend to increase. Maybe we lose one or two that were unexpected. Maybe the feedback scores are coming down a little bit when they shouldn't be. And trying to spot what the issue is and see how we can address it before anyone even knows it's there. That's the main approach that I take. Right, it tries to be as proactive as possible. Sometimes it's reactive, and there's an issue that's arisen, and there's a million things I want to do, but I kind of save them for times when they may be needed. I mean, I'll give you an example. The next couple of things now. Circadian rhythm lighting is something I really want, not just for residents, but for the staff as well, so that they can wind down at the end of a shift and then 8 o'clock comes along, they can go home and probably feel more tired and probably get a good night's sleep as opposed to the bright lights. There was something that I'm stealing from another provider, but I can't actually remember who it was, so I can't give them the credit. But the Random Act of Kindness Award, they did every month, instead of an Employee of the Month, it was someone who did something above and beyond, and to anyone, for each other, for a family member, for a resident. And it was noted, and it just gives that incentive to show a bit more generosity and kindness, or someone who maybe is naturally doing more and more than they need to, being rewarded for that. And so I kind of build up a little folder of ideas that I look at for when the time comes, as opposed to trying to do everything now. I think, for instance, the stuff we've done in the last 12 months, we're letting that sit and develop. Eventually, and unfortunately, that will lead to some complacency, and people will rest on the laurels unless we jump the gun there and get ahead of it. So that's where I think metrics and data come in really handy. I'm a big advocate of data. I don't think it's box filling or box ticking at all. I think it's valuable information that, if you look at it from an aerial view, you can spot trends and problems before they even happen. And one of the other things, though, is we speak to care workers a lot and try and help them, and the idea of person-centered care in terms of the care workers, a really good one. And everyone is an individual and has to be treated differently to one another. They all have different problems, different needs. But I think part of being able to get to that point of building that relationship is you've got to let your guard down as the provider or the manager as well. A lot of my staff, the care workers, team members, whichever word, they know an awful lot about me, an awful lot of my private life. And I don't mind sharing it. They know more than I think most providers would be comfortable sharing, but it's only through that vulnerability would they return the favor when the time comes. So if I've got a problem at home, I tend to blab my mouth. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think too many providers, especially smaller providers, and it's, I'm going to be a bit harsh on them because I think they're the ones that don't get this modern workforce as well as bigger providers do. They still have this mask up. They still have this perception that they can't be too nice to people. They have to be tough. They have to be, rule with an iron rod. It just doesn't work anymore. It's just not the way it is. People respond to vulnerability. People respond to being open and honest with them and showing some weakness in there. And for me, especially with some of the younger care workers that we have, it's sometimes you find a common ground in the way we were raised or the way we were brought up or some of the difficulties we might have shared in childhood. And when the time comes, that care worker, A, feels like they can come to you more, and then B, will share their problems with you that you can then help. Because otherwise you're just sending out feedback forms to people who see you as management and, yeah, great. Can you name something you're not happy with? And they'll name generic issues, maybe in terms of workload, a co-worker, pay might be one. So it's trying to break down barriers, as others have said. And I think the only way you do that is by being more human and not being afraid to be more human and not being afraid to be more vulnerable. And understanding that being nice or being kind to the workforce is not a weakness. Some people are going to abuse it. Some people are always going to take advantage of some of the kind stuff you do or some of the better policies that you do. That's fine. That's fine. It will always happen, and you have to accept that. You can move them on. Don't let it ruin what you're trying to build as a culture overall by one or two bad apples who are not mature enough for it. But I think, as well as that, always get your metrics in as well, get your data in, do the boring daily stuff of counting up everything and trying to spot things before they happen. And then you're never going to be in reactive mode. You're always kind of ahead of everybody. You can kind of sense when something's brewing before anyone else does. And I think that's how you get a nice consistent positive workforce that you don't always have to just throw gimmicks at to try and get a quick fix, but instead you can build long-term and build, even more importantly, the long-term relationships.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And that nicely brings us to the ending of our webinar today and our conversation. I really appreciate all of you sharing what you think is important around care workers and well-being, and all of those amazing things that you do or you're planning on doing to support them. One thing I must add is that obviously working with the care workers charity will help you evidence some of the support that you do for your staff. So I strongly recommend that you get in touch and partner up with us. So huge thank you to Leah, Ruth, Ali, Camille and Sophie for your time today and sharing what you have shared. Thank you very much for everybody who's joined us and watched, and those who will watch once we post it online. Have a lovely afternoon and thank you.